What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. And today we're going to be going over some things that I found interesting simply by reading through a maintenance manual because I have no life. Um, but the interesting thing is the reason that I found the information is because of a comment that was left on one of my videos. So on one of the videos, I think it was the hydraulic video, a question was asked that said, where does the 50% quantity come from for the reservoir, the quantity of lights on the panel? Because it's not written in the FCOM or they couldn't find it in their FCOM. And that's very true. I'm sure that most FCOMs aren't going to have this information in it. And the thing is it kind of sucks. It's kind of sad, really. But when you go through most FCOMs, what you're going to see is going to be something like this. Now, this is a generic FCOM, and when I say generic, I mean it is a Boeing only FCOM, so it's not used for flight. It's simply the basic Boeing systems before any of the stuff from an airline are added into it, right? So when we look at this, and we look at the number 2 there, the blue number 2, which is the quantity lights, or it could be RSVR, reservoir lights, right? Depending on the aircraft. When we look at this and then we look at the definition, when it's illuminated, it's going to be amber, and it says reservoir quantity is low. That's all you're going to find. When you go into the actual system description portion, it's going to say that the quantity lights are low quantity in the reservoir lights. That's it. It's not going to say, well, it's 50% quantity, or it's this, or it's that. And I've looked through this one in particular. I've looked through other airlines as well. I've looked for between the 7.5 and the 7.6 to see if any of the FCOMs that I have, which is quite a few, have a number associated with it, and I can't find one. Now, does that mean the 50% is wrong, or that the, whatever, because there's not a number for it, so it must not be true? No, that's not true at all. It's, if we think about what the FCOMs have become, right? So when I was in the military, I've said this, I was a KC-135 boom operator. I was responsible for knowing everything in the front of the airplane to back up the pilots. And then I was responsible for everything from the flight deck door all the way back. That was cargo loading, that was aircraft systems, that was air refueling, that was everything, right? So your knowledge had to be pretty wide. You didn't have to know everything, you just had to know where to look the stuff up, right? We had what were called Dash 1s, which is what normal airlines call FCOMs, or Flight Crew Operation Manuals, or AFMs, Aircraft Flight Manual. They're all the same thing. It just depends. Like, you'll hear me say Dash 1 because I will go back to that, and it's a mistake, but it's the same thing as an FCOM. So in our Dash 1s, you had 2 of them. You had Volume 1, Volume 2. Volume 1 was your checklist, your normal, your non-normals, your weather, all that kind of stuff, right? Volume 2 was all your system descriptions and everything else. But this was 20 years ago, 22 years ago, 23 years ago now from when I started, but it was 20 years ago. So the size of the Dash 1 was huge, and we had to carry it with us, and it was 1,400 pages and all this other thing. Now, I'm not saying that normal FCOMs aren't long. They are, but the information included in those Dash 1s was a lot more than what you find in airline, like civilian airline FCOMs. And from what I've been told, older FCOMs had more information in them. And then what ended up happening is Boeing decided, at least this is all my opinion, but Boeing decided, okay, pilots might not need to know all of this information, right? They don't need to know that it's 50%. They just need to know that the quantity is getting low and they need to get it fixed. They don't need to know what the pressure is. They just need to know that the pressure is low and they're going to have issues in that system. Things like that. They made it much more generic. And that did a couple things. That allowed people with less experience to be able to fly these bigger airplanes and not have to go through the rigorous training of having to take a droplet of fuel or a droplet of hydraulic fluid and running it through the entire system and memorizing all these numbers and all that kind of stuff. There is a place, in my opinion, for that type of training, and there is a place for the type of training that we do now. In my opinion, do pilots need to know their systems? Yes. Do they need to know them more in depth than probably what a lot of airlines teach? Yes. That is strictly my opinion. That is strictly my opinion. I was raised in the military side of things where you had to know things. You had to know what the green band was on a gauge. You had to know what the limits were for that particular system. You had to know that the hydraulic system was 3,000 plus or minus 250. You had to know that the electrical system was 115, 400 hertz, 3-phase, blah, 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 blah. Pilots don't need to know that stuff anymore. At least not on the bigger airplanes. Like, I get that there are airplanes that are still taught that way, and that's fine. But in the 7.6, for example, you're not required to know any voltages. You're not required to know any pressures. You're not required to know any of that kind of stuff because you don't need to. Is the light on or is it off? That's really what it is. So what this video is not necessarily a knock on pilots' knowledge. It's just an expansion of what you might already know. If you're a pilot, you might get bored as shit with this, and I'm sorry. You can skip the video. But if you're a maintenance guy, maybe this will help understand, what a pilot looks at and why there might be a disconnect when you're trying to explain something to them or when they're trying to explain something to you. When a pilot says the quantity's low, they don't know how low. They just know it's low. Now, granted, they could look, and we'll talk about that, but you get what I'm saying. So realize that when I do these types of videos, it's not a knock on anybody's knowledge. It's not a knock on any particular airline training. It is just simply, these are things that I find interesting, and I'm just kind of like, oh, here, I'm going to share this because I thought it was neat, and I'm kind of a nerd that way. So that's what we're going to be talking about. But anyway, now that I've wasted 8 minutes of your time, this was all from one person's comment. So please make comments on the videos, ask questions, send me an email, brandon@gsiguy.com. Send me emails to there. Any of that kind of stuff. I try and get in here and I try and answer it. And if I can't answer it well enough in a comment or a response, I'll make a video. And that's kind of what happened here. I answered her question, but I wanted to go more in depth because I found some other stuff that I thought might be interesting to share. So that being said, let's move on. I'm sorry, I'm rambling. So again, reservoir quantity. We know that it's low in the flight deck by the quantity or the reservoir light. Fine. How low is it? It's 50%. The quantity is 50% or less. How do I know that? I know that because I've looked in aircraft maintenance manuals for the 7.6 where it says that 0.5 or less is when the quantity light or the reservoir light will illuminate, letting us know that there is low quantity in the system. Now, with that being said, there's a couple other things that you may or may not know. So what we're talking about are the quantity lights across here, right? So the quantity lights across there are what we're talking about when it comes to 50% quantity in the reservoir. On the status page, on the lower display of the EICAS, you're going to have a hydraulic quantity listing. Now realize that this particular screen might not be on your particular airplane. And why do I say that? Because not every airline paid for having all of these displays. Now, I'm being facetious. I don't necessarily know if it's a pay thing or if it's a pin thing on the back of the screen. But not every airplane will have the hydraulic pressure. Not every airplane will have the oil quantity for the APU or the RPM. Some of them just have EGT. Some of them, there is no hydraulic pressure. The brake temperature monitor at the bottom right-hand corner, those don't always exist either. Okay? So just realize that just because you see it on my screen doesn't necessarily mean you'll have it in your aircraft. What you will have, and then what I know you will have, is the hydraulic quantity and the APU. I believe it's the APU EGT is on all of them, but not the RPM. I'd have to look at it again. But then the oxygen pressure, you're also going to have the oxygen pressure listed here as well. So under the hydraulic quantity, this is normal, right? Now realize that 1.0 is 100% full. So 1.0 is 100% full. We got our quantity here. 0.89 is 89%, 0.9 is 90%, and so on and so forth, right? 0.75, 92, whatever. You just multiply by 100, guys. It's 100%. So when we talk about the different things that you can see for your hydraulic quantity, right now I can tell that all my hydraulic quantity is perfectly fine. However, when I get to 0.75 or less, I'll get this little magenta RF next to the number. Guess what that means? Refill. That's what that means. It means refill your quantity. Now, the question is, does that, if it has an RF there, do I get an EICAS message? The answer is no, I don't. There is no EICAS message associated with an RF. However, there is a status message, and it's not even a message, it's just status showing the RF saying that you need to refill. There's also a message on the maintenance page, which you can't get to, or you shouldn't get to as a crew member. But the maintenance guys, you can push the little buttons in the back and then make the maintenance page come up. There'll be a status message on there letting you know that that particular system needs refilled. Now, I posted a question on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and I asked, how well do you know your gauges? And the question was, at what point do you get an overfull or an overfill indication? And then there's some answers on there. It's like 1.5, 1.22, 1.21, or 1. I can't even remember what all I said. Anything above 1.0. That's what it was. And then the last one was overfill. There is no overfill indication. Now, it'll be curious to see how many people answer that before they watch this video, or just won't watch the video at all, and they'll answer it thinking that they know the answer. Because there are people out there that don't know that there is an overfill indication on here, meaning that the reservoir has too much fluid in it. So that's going to look something like this. Now, granted, in the sim software that I have, I'm not able to overfill the quantity. That's why I kind of had to make my own number, make my own OF to get it to show up there. But 1.22 or above, you're going to get an OF, or an overfull indication, telling me there's too much in here. And then as far as an EICAS message, the pilots themselves aren't going to get an EICAS message. You're going to get the OF on the status page. On the maintenance page, though, you're going to get left, right, or center, depending on which reservoir it is, with the hydraulic quantity over full message. And it'll look just like that, O/full, and go from there. Now, we talked about the quantity or reservoir lights illuminating, letting us know that we have low reservoir quantity, and then what triggers that. Okay, so this shows 0.46, but it's 0.5 or below is going to set off an EICAS caution message, and it's going to give me left, right, and center hydraulic quantity, depending on which hydraulic reservoir it is. And the hydraulic quantity message tells me that I have less than 50%. Now, there are some other things that happen here that I'm not going to go into in detail in this video, but I will say if you watch my hydraulics video that you'll see it. And that is the center, in this particular case, the center hydraulic system would go into what's called isolation, allowing me to still have access to my alternate brake system and my nose wheel steering. But, again, that's in the hydraulic video. Now, you might be asking yourself, what what does the reservoir even look like? Like, what are we talking about? How much are we talking about? And it's not very big. And this is directly out of an AMM. So you have little sight glasses in there. They got two of them. One that's for overfill, one that's for refill. Meaning that if I look in that sight glass and it's completely full, let's say for the refill sight glass, I look in the sight glass and it's completely full. All right, I'm above the refill line. I don't need to refill it. If I can see it in the overfill sight glass, that tells me I have too much. Now, you're a pilot. Let's say you're a pilot. I don't know exactly who's going to be watching the video. But if you're a pilot and you walk around, you're not sticking your head up there to find where this is. You need a ladder to get to it. All right. Or you need to open up panels, or you need to open up the gear doors. Because I'll tell you right now, it's probably not located where you think it's located. Or maybe it is, and you know that you can't get to it. It's going to be located somewhere like this. And each pylon is where your left and right hydraulic system reservoirs are going to be. So inside that pylon is where they're located. And the center hydraulic system is going to be located in the left wheel well. But you have to open the gear door to see it. A little basketball, a little silver looking basketball with a bunch of, pipes going out of it. But that's what it is. So here's something else that's kind of cool, or neat anyway, in my opinion, is how the quantity actually gets transmitted to the EICAS. So see there where it says quantity transmitter, this thing down here at the bottom. So that's actually like a long rod that goes inside of the reservoir. And what it does is it actually takes the change of fluid and it creates an electrical current that it sends to the EICAS monitoring computer. And then the EICAS monitoring computer takes that voltage reading and says, oh, well, it's this much voltage, therefore it's this full. And then it sends up the decimal to the status page. So it's not like you have a float or something in there that's measuring this shit. It's actually a rod that is sending electrical signals back to the computer, and then the computer is sending it to the EICAS. That's kind of neat. Again, aviation weird nerd stuff is what sticks in my head, and it's that kind of weird stuff that intrigues me about how airplanes are designed versus just having a little float inside there and telling me that. Now, I may make another video about this, but this little thing right here, that is our fuel. It is our hydraulic temperature probe. So that'll be a different video. I'm not going to go over that now, but that, we've got a temperature probe, we've got a quantity measure, we've got sight glasses that you can look in and see. And then obviously there are, tubes that go out to each individual system. Or, each individual servo from that system, or however you want to put it. So I thought that was kind of neat. So again, just kind of a quick review. You've got the 50% quantity is going to give me my quantity or RSVR light. You've got 75% or less is going to give me a refill indication. 122% or more is going to give me an overfull indication. And these are all things you can see on either your EICAS on the upper side with a caution message or on your status page under your hydraulic quantity on that lower portion. Now, as always, I'm going to ask you to subscribe. I'm going to ask you to hit the bell, and I'm going to ask you to like the video, share the video, whatever you got to do. Make it a part of your daily routine to review if you are somebody who's on this airplane all the time. It does not matter to me as long as you like, share, and subscribe, because that's what helps me and that's what motivates me to continue doing this. Also, the comments, I tell you what, the comments really help when you guys ask for things, when you ask questions that I'm like, that's an interesting thing. Let me see if I can find a good answer for it. And like I said, if I can't answer it clearly enough in a comment, I will make a video of it and I will post it and I will say, hey, look, here, this is what it is. And that's kind of what happened here. I was able to answer the question in the comment, but boy, I thought it needed a little bit more context. So I decided to go this route. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, whatever, put it in the comments and I'll address them that way. If you don't want to put it in the comments and you want to address me personally, you can write it to Brandon@gsiguy.com and I will be glad to answer your questions from there. All right, guys, you can find me on TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, as you probably already have. And outside of that, I hope you guys have a great day, great night, great evening. I'm going to go watch the U.S. play in the gold medal match for curling because that's, for some reason, entertaining to me. All right, we'll see you guys later.